On this edition of Leaders in Focus from IMG Studios here at Stockley Park, the CEO of the British Olympic Association, Andy Anson, will be with us. He'll be talking preparing for Paris 2024.
The excitement levels are high, the expectation, anticipation around what a great Games it's going to be for everyone is massive.
Building up the Team GB brand.
Team GB actually brings the whole country together, and that's got stronger and stronger. You know, these are normal people doing extraordinary things, and that makes this brand very, very powerful.
And being a leader and learning from those who lead you.
So I think it's important you look back at those leaders and say, I've had some really fun people, and I take something from each of those businesses and each of those areas that I've worked in.
This is Leaders in Focus. Andy Anson, thank you for joining us on Leaders in Focus. Paris 2024, as we talk at the end of May, is looming.
Yep.
How are the stress levels? How are the energy levels? How are the excitement levels?
The energy levels are good. As an organisation, I think we've got a lot of experienced people, so I wouldn't say there's stress. I'd just say there's a lot of focused energy, and everyone realises now what they've got to do. I feel like we've got a fantastic team in place. And as a CEO, if you have a fantastic team in place, you can rely on individuals to deliver the things that they've got to deliver. I think we're in good shape as we head to Paris.
So no stress. What about the excitement levels?
Unbelievable. I mean, for me, this is going to be certainly the best game since London, but I actually think it might be even better. I mean, the way that Paris is using the city as a backdrop for all the venues is just going to be incredible. So it feels, and especially after Tokyo, where we operated in a bubble and there were no spectators in many of the venues, this is going to be so exciting. So yeah, the excitement levels are high. The expectation, anticipation around what a great Games it's going to be for everyone is massive. So yeah, we're looking forward to it, but we've got a lot of work to do in the next 8.5 weeks.
It's as you say, the first European Games since London 2012. I wonder how important you feel Paris 2024 is to, and let's start specifically with the BOA Team GB.
Yeah, it's big for us. I mean, it's almost better than having a home Games for the British Olympic Association, because when you stage a host Games as the National Olympic Committee, you give all of your commercial rights to the organising committee. We do two things basically. We take athletes to Games and we raise commercial revenue. And if you have half of your organisation taken away and given to the organising committee, that makes for quite a strange environment. I was on the board during London 2012 as a non-exec. So as we head to Paris, which is literally a 2.5-hour train journey from London, we're in control of everything. And so the opportunity that brings from a commercial perspective is massive. Obviously, it's very easy operationally to get the athletes, the teams, the big entourage backwards and forwards and to make sure we support the athletes as well as we can. So it feels like it's an incredible opportunity to have something so close to home where we're in full control of our environment.
Tell me a little bit about how you have seen the evolution of the Team GB brand over recent years. You've been in the role at the BOA since 2019, as you say, on the board for a long time before that. How strong is that Team GB brand?
It's unbelievable. I mean, it's as strong as it's ever been. And now, going back, I think, to around 2008, the Beijing Olympics, is when the Team GB brand really got properly invested in and started being built. Obviously, London gave it a big move forward, if you like, a big step forward. And then since then, we've slowly but surely invested in building it in a brand. And I think actually, with everything that's happened from a political, macroeconomic, global perspective, the brand has become stronger. Certainly post-Brexit, it's the one unifying brand in the country that brings the whole country together. And after Brexit, we're an incredibly divided nation, and we had the backdrop with the Scottish National Party trying to drive an independent Scotland agenda. Team GB actually brings the whole country together, and that's got stronger and stronger. I also think the athletes, especially with the emergence of social and digital media over that time frame, are able to build the brand and be part of the brand in a very strong way. And the great thing about the athletes is there's a lot of humility. There's a lot of recognition, but there's incredible humility. These are normal people doing extraordinary things, and that makes this brand very, very powerful. So we're lucky to have it. I'm obsessive about controlling the environment, how it's portrayed and how it's depicted wherever it emerges. but we need to make sure we cherish it and look after it and protect it actually legally to make sure that as we go forward, it's as strong as it is today, because it's the one thing we can commercialise, right? It's our only commercial asset, so we have to make sure it's as strong as it possibly can be.
What are some of the challenges and maybe the reasons you feel it needs to be protected and cherished?
The first one is the commercial reason, is that we live on sponsorship revenue, right? We are 100% commercially funded. We as an organisation get nothing from the government, from the lottery. That goes to the sports and the athletes, the national governing bodies. We only raise commercial revenue. We don't have any broadcast rights to sell. We don't have any venues where we can monetize or commercialize the brand. So the brand is everything. Now the brand is made up of sports and athletes and events where we participate. But it's the thing that we have to protect so that we can raise the money that we need. So going into the LA cycle, we'll need over £80 million to operate Team GB as effectively as we want to. That all has to come from commercial revenue. So the brand is absolutely central to that.
Looking at the UK, the wider UK sports funding model as it stands today, what do you see as some of the pros and cons of that, particularly compared with how it works in other parts of the world?
It's a very strong system. So the starting point is this model whereby the government and the National Lottery have put money into UK sport, who's then distributed it amongst the individual national governing bodies. That is a very powerful and successful model. I think two issues actually when we stand here today. One is that money in real terms has diminished quite a lot. Certainly since 2011, it's come down 30-40% in real terms, and that's not great. Athletes' remuneration that they get through that system has come down equivalently, and I think that is a challenge. Government, are tightening their purse strings everywhere, and so that's hit some of the UK sport funding. We need the National Lottery to be buoyant and keep growing. It's obviously got a new operator, and we all wait and see and hope that everything is successful there. But that's really important. The distribution mechanism has been incredibly powerful, originally going where the success has been and making sure we fund success and medal potential. That's had to change over the last 5 or 6 years, obviously with the need to make sure we win in the right way, and some of the issues that individual sports have faced about the environment and the performance environment need to be addressed. But the funding mechanism works. The one thing that has been concerning is that the individual sports and national governing bodies have not been raising the commercial revenues that they used to. And I think less than 3% of all the revenue going into national governing bodies is from commercial sources. However, it was great last week to see that British Cycling have done their new sponsorship deal with Lloyds Bank. That was a real step forward. And I do think in athletics, in swimming, in cycling, in triathlon, there's really ambitious new leadership who are trying to drive a much more commercial agenda, and that's important.
What you've outlined there is something that, to a lesser or greater extent, we're seeing across the whole of sport outside the Olympic ecosystem, if you like. And in a lot of places outside that ecosystem, the answer is often private equity money, institutional investment. Is that an area which you see as a potential opportunity, a potential route to greater financial stability, financial success for not just the BOA, but the national governing bodies and the other organisations within this Olympic world?
Yeah, it's not something that's come on the agenda at all, actually, in this world, because the issue you have is that the national governing bodies have a significant amount of government funding, and that relationship between government and private investment would be quite a complex one. So it's not really come on the radar, certainly for us as a National Olympic Committee, certainly for the IOC, and certainly for national governing bodies. I've not heard of that. And with my other hat on as chair of Lancashire Cricket Club, obviously there's a lot going on in the 100 at the moment, which has got the interest of many private equity and private investors. Individuals around the world, and I think that is happening now. I think it's less likely to happen at the moment in the Olympic world.
Talked about the importance of the upcoming games for the BOA and for sport in the UK, Team GB. What about the wider global challenges around the Olympic Games and the Olympic movement? How challenged do you think it is at the moment?
I don't think it's that challenged, actually. It's interesting. We're in a world, definitely in the sports world, where the big are getting bigger and the small are finding it harder. And thank goodness the Olympics is one of those big properties, and it's still one of the true global properties alongside the FIFA World Cup. The Olympic Games is the big one. And I've not seen that diminishing at all. And certainly the appetite to host and stage is not diminishing. We've got LA coming up in 28, we've got Brisbane in 2032. We already know that India and Qatar are interested in 2036. So there's a demand for that. Even in the Winter Games now, we've got certainty with France coming up after Milan Cortina. We've got Salt Lake City interested. We've got a lot of other interest in staging the game. So right now it feels strong. Now the models may have to change. We're very dependent on big broadcast deals, and the NBC deal in America being the big one, which drives a lot of the revenue that comes into the IOC, and then the sponsorship deals, what's called the TOPS deals, which are the Coca-Cola deals, the Visa deals that go on globally. They are quite traditional in their use of the Olympic rings as IP, and I think those models need to change and reinvent themselves. We're certainly experiencing that as a National Olympic Committee, but we've had our most successful ever quad in terms of raising revenues. We've managed to attract new, big, fresh brands, and it's really exciting. So certainly, I think at the IOC level and at the National Olympic Committee level, we are seeing a lot of success, and that's mirrored. We speak a lot to what we call the Five Eyes, the US, Canada, New Zealand and Australia, and certainly they seem to also be doing well as National Olympic Committees from a commercial perspective. And so I think the model feels right. Obviously there's challenges with hosting these major games in a single town or a single city, but it still feels strong and it still feels very attractive.
How closely are you going to be watching the TV viewership numbers, the digital consumption around Paris?
Yeah, very closely. I mean, certainly the TV numbers, I think, if you take this market, are going to be significant because of the time zone. It's the first time it's been back in this time zone, as you said, since London. So I think the viewership numbers will be very strong for the UK. I think that will be similar in the US and other markets. The digital numbers just keep growing and growing, but I do think there's still a lot more to do in terms of creating meaningful digital content. And certainly I think the IOC need to up their game in that area and work much more effectively with the National Olympic Committee and the international federations to create a really meaningful digital and social media presence. I don't think they do that as well as they could at the moment.
And from a BOA perspective, in terms of that enhanced digital coverage of Olympic sports, Olympic worlds, obviously the athletes are at the absolute heart of that.
Yeah.
We are in an era of athletes creating their own content, creating their own platforms.
Yeah.
What are the challenges from a BOA, from a Team GB point of view, in terms of access to those athletes who also have responsibilities and commitments with their own individual sports governing bodies, perhaps other teams, clubs that they're affiliated with? Is that something that is going to be an increasing challenge for the BOA going forward? I
think it's an increasing opportunity. I think I look back to last year's Super Bowl and all the activity and the noise that was going on around Taylor Swift and the teams playing, and there was nothing detracting from anything. It was all feeding this incredibly popular, well-watched spectacle. And I think in the world that we're in, that can happen as well. We don't need to control individual athletes and what they're doing. It's great if some of our athletes want to go out and use social media to build themselves. In fact, we've just done a deal with TikTok, which is an attractive commercial deal, but it also gives something to the athletes to help them learn how to better develop their own personal presence. So we're lucky that the kind of sponsorship deals we have with big brands like Adidas, Aldi, NatWest, British Gas, they want to use athletes, right? They want to bring athletes, and so they will pay extra over and above our sponsorship deals to secure athletes' participation. You've seen with things like British Gas and NatWest advertising on television how many athletes are participating in those advertising campaigns. So and then in our own social media and digital media content, which is what we use to fuel our sponsorship deals, we have no issue finding athletes to participate. In fact, the opposite. I had a great chat with Tom Daly at one point, who said he loves doing stuff for Team GB because Team GB is what defined him. It's what created his presence. And he's one of our most popular sports people in terms of social media presence. Incredibly popular, and yet he's still very happy to do stuff with us, with our sponsors, and to be a big part of our story. So I don't see it as a threat at all. I see it as the best opportunity, and the more popular we can make our athletes, the more it helps our brand.
Big topic of conversation in Olympic circles at the moment is around payments to athletes.
Yeah.
We obviously saw World Athletics make an announcement in that regard a few weeks ago. Should athletes be paid directly for winning Olympic medals?
I think we've got to debate it. I don't have a problem with it. I had a problem with how the decision was announced and how the consultation didn't happen around it. But I think we started having a discussion with our athletes about the best way to compensate and remunerate them. We had a brilliant session with our Athletes Commission last week. So I think we've all got to engage to figure out what's the best mechanism for compensating athletes. And, we do have professional sports in the Olympics already where there are very highly paid golfers and tennis players playing in the games. So I'm not averse to it. I just think we've got to do it properly, have a view that makes it fair and equitable for everyone participating, and then come up with a good solution. But as I said earlier, in real terms, our athletes' compensation from the central funding is going down. We've got to find a way of getting that back up. And if that means us and other bodies have to help with that, then so be it. But I think there's a long way to go. But I'm not opposed to what's happened with UK athletics. I just think it could have been handled better.
I wonder if two conversations are actually going to converge as the Olympic world turns its attentions to LA. You've got the big debate in the US around college athletes and how and whether they should be paid. Olympic athletes, different scenario, but a similar broad situation there. And I wonder if actually the next 4 years is where that debate's going to be had. Yeah,
and we're going to the most commercial market that there is, and it will definitely move that debate on. I think what's happened with the NCAA, happened overnight and then has moved forward very quickly. And I think we're going to see that in the Olympic world to some extent. And I think LA will definitely be at the heart of that. But for me, the important thing is that we all engage properly and we all understand what the constraints are. We've got to raise our £80+ million to take the team there and create the best possible performance environment in LA. The athletes need to understand that, and they need to understand what government and lottery funding is available. And then we've got to try and overlay some other revenue streams on top of that. And that's why it's good to see cycling getting their new sponsorship deal. But I think that debate's going to go on now. I mean, certainly, it's been thrown out there by World Athletics, and now everyone else is going to continue having that debate.
Let's talk a little bit about you, Andy. You've worked for some of the most recognisable brands in sport and media, actually. Disney, Channel 4, Manchester United, ATP, Fanatics. Have I missed any? A few.
That'll do.
Which one of those organisations, either that I said or didn't say, made the biggest impact on you?
I would say Disney, without doubt, was the one that had the biggest impact, because it's where an incredible brand or set of brands met an incredibly hard-nosed business environment and created one of the most impactful business environments you could want to work in. So I learned a lot about marketing, creating brands, protecting brands, managing brands, but I also learned a lot about managing the bottom line and doing really aggressive commercial deals. I loved it. I have to say I excelled there. I found it a very motivating environment to be in, incredible people, incredible energy. The way that Disney build a new brand, if you take something like The Lion King as a movie, it's an incredibly brilliant piece of work, as a film. But then all the other things that happen around that one property, I was in the consumer products division, and how you build that brand and extend that brand and keep it going for years afterwards was an incredible learning experience for me. And I think that's why now at the heart of everything I do, it always starts with a strong brand. I'm working now with Team GB. I try and give the brand the same love and protection that those companies gave to their brands. It was just an incredible experience. And so all these things build up until, when I said at the beginning I don't get stressed, it's because I've had so much stress at different points in my life that now nothing ever seems that serious.
Which I guess is a good position to be in.
Yeah, it's a great position to be in. It makes you better at your job.
Maybe talk a little bit about a couple of the other leaders that you've worked under who you think have been particularly influential in your career.
Yeah. So the first one I'd say was David Gill at Manchester United. We're still very close. He's a great leader. He behaved, first of all, I'd say he's one of the most ethical, decent people you'll ever come across. He's very clear in his thinking. He's very straight. When he says something, he means it. I love the way he handled football transfers, for example. There was no fuss, no noise in the media. The deals just happened. If you go back to the era before him, every Manchester United transfer was covered in the press in great detail. We overpaid systematically for players under-received for players like David Beckham. When David Gill took over, that happened in a really quiet, effective way. He didn't speak to media very often. He did one interview with Gary Richardson every year. And he just handled things in a really decent way. And even when the takeover happened, it was difficult for him personally. He managed to move on and make it work and develop a great relationship with the Glazers. He also obviously had a close relationship with Alex Ferguson and managed him in a really good way. So I look at David and think he had a massive influence on where I went and how I behaved. So I think every leader you can learn something from, and it's up to you to take the strong. Even the Glazers, where I'd been my own person on the board of a PLC, and Brian and Joel became very active in the world that I was doing, which was the commercial director role. You know, I learned a lot about sponsorship sales from them. Didn't always like it, wasn't always easy, but I learned a lot. So I think it's important you look back at those leaders and say, I've had some really fun people, and I take something from each of those businesses and each of those areas that I've worked in. And now, you know, I'm a CEO with a lot of experience and a lot of independence, but even now I have a great chair in Sir Hugh Robertson. And when it comes to high-level politics and high-level media and comms, we have a fantastic relationship in terms of how we work together and help each other and get to a better place. And there's bags of experience in the room, but we still help and still learn and still bring new things to the table. So it's good. And I just feel now you've always got to have an open mind and learn from new people. And I'm going to have a new chair in November. I've got to figure out who that's going to be, and I've got to forge a new relationship. Equally, I think I can help my team to grow and become better, you know, with the experience that I've got. And especially, you know, I inherited a commercial director, Tim Ellerton, who was pretty browbeaten when I joined, because we'd not had the most successful run of sponsorship sales. He's done the most amazing job over the last 4 years, and I like to think that I've been a part of that because I've helped to show him how to be resilient, how to keep selling, how to clarify the sales message, bounce back, do it again, and we've had the most incredible run of sponsorship sales. So hopefully that's me, you know, conveying my experience to my team.
It's well over a decade ago now, but I wonder, how do you reflect on another job that you did, another high-profile job, which was running England's bid for the 2018 World Cup? What are the reflections with a bit of distance?
So first of all, I'd say it was fun, right? I mean, people may not realise this, but for 2 years, I was travelling the world with some great people, especially David Dean, who's become a great friend, trying to sell the bid to the FIFA Exco members, and we had a lot of fun doing it.
Did it feel fun at the time?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
We were in Tahiti with the guys from Oceania. We were in Trinidad and Tobago with Jack Warner. We were in the Côte d'Ivoire 4 or 5 times with Jack Anima. Yeah, we had a lot of fun along the way, and we got on really well with some of the individuals involved. So that's my first reflection, as I look back and you talk about resilience. You know, when the Times ran its article where it had got 3 of the FIFA members to ask for things that weren't truly legitimate, and then they all got booted out. That was a pretty stressful moment. So again, you learn resilience. You learn how to bounce back when things aren't going so well. But the one thing I really reflect on now is England is not the most popular country in the world, right? We are quite arrogant in how we behave. We take a very moralistic, high-level view of the world, and actually the world's not like that. And we try and impose that on other people, but they don't want to have that imposed on them. We have to behave in a different way if we're ever going to get a World Cup to this country. So, you know, you learn that not everyone behaves in the way you'd like them to behave. There's definitely bad stuff goes on in these bids, and you've just got to rise above it and be different from it. But ultimately, we couldn't win that bid against Russia. There is no way we could have won it, given how they behave and how we behave. That's life. When the FA came and asked me what I thought about bidding for the next World Cup, I said, only if we've got the full support of UEFA and we think that there's not going to be any serious competition from a China or a country where they're not accountable through democracy. Because those countries that have got a lot of money and don't have democracy, they can behave in a totally different way than us. So if I look back now, I don't think we could have done anything any differently. We did a great bid. We probably shouldn't have entered the competition. We were told by Michel Platini that we'd be the only European candidate, but he clearly liked this double bid that Blatter set up. And at that point, we're up against Russia and others, and I think we lost our chance at that point in time. It was quite interesting, though, in the months afterwards that there was so much noise about corruption. And we employed a man called Chris Steele, who's an ex-MI6 operative in Russia, as a consultant, and he was desperate to share all this information he'd found during the bid. And he was ultimately the guy who went to the FBI and got them to start the case that led to the downfall of FIFA. And he was desperate to get me involved. So I was one of the first people to meet the FBI. They came over to meet me in the RAC club. And things like that were quite... I had 4 agents in black trench coats waiting in the lobby of the RAC club to meet me.
Are these your guests, sir?
Yeah, and they clearly were. That was kind of interesting. It wasn't necessarily fun, but it was interesting to be part of that, and then to understand what then subsequently happened in terms of the arrest of Chuck Blazer for tax issues, and then how they used Chuck Blazer to bring down the rest of FIFA. It was fascinating to watch that unwind, and to feel that you were somehow part of that was actually quite encouraging. And FIFA did get torn apart. You know, all the guys that we dealt with, the regional presidents have gone, and they're long gone. I was just keen to make sure nothing reflected badly on me personally, but I don't think it ever did. I didn't really get that feeling from anyone. There were a few journalists who tried to stir up some stuff, but actually I think I moved on from it pretty quickly. I just wanted to establish myself as a business person, not a political person. The World Cup bid, you were basically like a politician. You were in the media every day. You were getting asked we had a lot of issues as well. I mean, when the Jack Warner handbag thing blew up, you know, that was a whole big media story. When we did our launch and there was a member of the London Council who was from the British National Party who was invited, that was another story. Everything you did, you had to face up to really tough media questioning and media grilling, and that was difficult. Through that, you learn if you enjoy it or not, and there's some pleasurable things, like doing something like this is actually quite fun. But equally, we've got some pretty aggressive journalists out there, and it can be really difficult. So I don't ever want to do a World Cup bid type thing again when I'm in the media spotlight all the time, every day. I'm on the front of newspapers. That's not what I want to do. But as part of my BOA job, I'm very happy to carry out the media duties, but I don't take all the responsibility for it. Hugh Robertson does a lot as chair. He does a lot of the high-level broadcast stuff. Mark England, my chef de mission, does the sports stuff, and that's how we do it. We kind of segment it. So I don't want to be the only spokesman for the BOA. I want other people to be also the face of the BOA, and that's important. We have to do it. It's part of our job, and you've got to try and enjoy it, right? It can be fun as well if you treat it properly.
Leadership, and you talked about your role at Lancashire County Cricket Club, where you've been the chair for a good few years now. And it strikes me that you're probably in somewhat of an unusual position as being the CEO of one organisation and the chair of another, and two very sort of high-profile organisations. And that relationship between CEO and chair, executive and board, I think is really interesting. From your perspectives, what are the key dynamics for a successful CEO-chair relationship?
The first thing, I mean, they are very, very different roles, and I think and I'm very hands-on as a CEO. So that the starting point is as a hands-on leader, I try and get involved in every little bit of the business without interfering too much with my team. But I do want to know what's going on. As chair, you've got to step back and let your CEO behave in that way. And I think actually...
Now, is that hard to do?
No, it's not. It would be if we didn't have a good CEO at Lancashire. But Daniel Gidney is a really good operator. He's all over the finances. He's all over the operations piece. He's a really good operator. So I touch base with him once or twice a week, right? We talk once or twice a week. Then we've got our board meetings, we have strategy sessions. And so that's how I manage it. I let him get on with it. And I think the role of the chair is to give your CEO enough rope, you know, to get on with it unless they mess something up, in which case, one of their responsibilities is they can get rid of you if something goes wrong. What I do think is important is to have complementarity. So if you take Hugh Robertson and myself, Hugh is an ex-sports minister. He has some business experience, but really political communication and chairing boards is where he's strong. I'm more of a hands-on, operational CEO with good commercial experience. He's very happy to let me get on with that, and we touch base on a weekly basis at least, probably twice a week, and we talk about everything. I don't ever want him to not know what I'm doing or to have anything that's a surprise, and I expect Daniel at Lancashire to be the same with me. But you've just got to create space. You've got to give guidance where it's needed. But you've got to have a good CEO who you trust, and that relationship can then work. It is interesting because I do know people in this industry where they've had good relationship with their chairs, and then new people have started and they're very different. They may be more hands-on than the previous incumbent, and that does create problems. I've got a new chair joining in November, so there's an unknown about what the new relationship will be like, and it's up to me and whoever that is to try and make it work. But that's not always easy.
We'll have no doubt people watching who would like to be in the frame, in the running for the big jobs across sport in the future, running sports organisations as you have for many years, what are some of the most important traits, skill sets that they should possess or be looking to possess?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the job has changed a lot since I started in 2004. Was my real first all sports job. I mean, I've been in the media before that, but at Man United in 2004. There weren't so many sophisticated leaders in sports at that time. United did have. We were lucky. We were a proper organisation. We looked around the Premier League. There was a lot of so-so. I'm being really rude about people, but there's a lot of so-so CEOs. Now there's a lot more professionalism, and actually, I think we've got to see sport as another business, right? And you can bring people in from outside sport who can make it better, because a lot of what you need you can get in other industries. So if you talk about building really strong brands, for example, that's transferable from FMCG companies, from other media companies. Talent management, definitely, media companies have that same thing. So I think the hardest thing, I have a lot of people asking me, how do I get into the sports world? And the hardest bit is that first step. You've just got to network like crazy to find that first step on the ladder, and then you're in. But it's really hard to get in, and there's a lot of young people desperate to work in the sports world, and they've just got to work really hard at networking. I went to INSEAD Business School in the 90s and did my MBA there, and one of the things you learn, if you want to get into a non-standard industry, I didn't, I went back into consulting, but if you want to get into sports or media or something, or tech, you've got to network like crazy, and you've got to do as much as you can to meet as many people in that industry. So I think that's the first thing. But then I think for CEOs or potential CEOs, there's a lot of similarities. So don't feel that sports is something special. It's actually got more similarity with other businesses than you might think.
And you said a word earlier that really struck me, which is resilience, which, hard to actively learn, but very useful.
It's really useful. I mean, especially if you take something like a football club, the scrutiny from the fan base is unbelievable, and from the media. And so if you're a CEO and things aren't going well, you're going to be under pressure, and you've just got to ignore it. And I look at David Gill, and he did that. He did it through the good times, the bad times. He just got on with his job. And I hope I'm the same, that when things aren't going well, that you're able to just get on and do the things that you can influence and keep bouncing back. That's important. But that resilience thing, you can only learn it on the job, when you get the punches, and then you learn, do you go down or do you get back up and start fighting again?
Final question. What are some of the things that whoever the CEO of the BOA is in 10 years' time, and it might be you, Andy, it might not be you.
I doubt it.
What are the biggest things that you think they're going to have to contend with?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think the media world is moving so quickly, and the way that social media has evolved in the last 5 years or so, that's just gathering pace. And I think the sports rights business is going to have to move on at the same pace. It's changing in different sports. The broadcast revenues are still very, very important. The main broadcast relationships are still important, but I do think that understanding of how to use different media channels to reach people in different ways. And when you watch the Gen Z people coming through, they are behaving in a very, very different way. I've got 3 young 20-year-old kids. They wouldn't even find a football match on the BBC. They wouldn't know it was there, because they never go to the EPG to look. They just go online. They go to Sky Sports maybe, but they don't go and search for those games. So we've got to find a different way of signposting things. It's quite interesting for me, even now, watching Eurosport as they embrace the Olympics. I don't think they've done a great job of signposting the Olympics. Certainly during Tokyo, there was a lot of noise about, I can't find anything. People have got to get better at the marketing to signpost where content is. That's one thing. I do think the understanding of consumers through deep knowledge and deep intense use of data is going to move on at a fast pace as well. And I think that's another thing that we're all going to have to learn. I'm lucky that Manchester United in 2004, we made a massive investment into CRM. When I left, we had 7.5 million clean names on our database that we could market directly to, and it's a massive sponsorship tool. It's amazing to me that there's still a lot of sports businesses that haven't even done the basics now, 20 years later, that we were doing back then. And there's consulting companies who make a lot of money just by doing the simple stuff that we were doing way back then. So I think that data piece is important. I think the athlete, how the athlete world evolves. We talk about athlete compensation, athlete rights. That's going to change. I think, you know, the movement of different sports is happening. For me, the cricket world is fascinating at the moment. As you see the influence that the IPL is having on the global cricket market, it's come from nowhere 15 years ago into this incredible global property. And so cricket being in the Olympics in 2028 was almost inevitable, and that's changing very rapidly. And I think other sports are going to move in terms of increased popularity, reduced popularity. So it's an ever-moving thing. And I think as a CEO, you've just got to have this mindset of, okay, I'm flexible, I'm adaptable, and I'm resilient, and I'll find the next best solution. I'll keep working at it. But you don't ever want to get stuck in your ways. And I'm a big believer in the fact that in your organisation, you need a bunch of kids all the time. I'm being really rude about calling them kids, but you know what I mean, young 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds, who are full of new ideas and new energy. And for me, if I didn't have those in the organisation, I'd become stuck in my ways and stayed. But when you see these young guys coming through who are challenging you, who are bringing new things to the table, that's so important. And it means sometimes you've got to move people out of the organisation to make way for the next generation to come through. But you've got to have them in your organisation because they are living the world as it's going to become in the next 10 years.
Andy Anson, good luck for the next few weeks and
it's gonna
beyond.
be great.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.